A woman in a navy blazer sits across from two detectives in a sunlit conference room. Her hands are folded. Her posture is perfect. She answers every question with the kind of clarity that comes from telling the truth, or from having practiced it enough times that it sounds like truth. "He was under enormous pressure," she says. "I should have seen it coming." One detective nods. The other writes something down. She doesn't cry. He doesn't need to. Outside the window, the skyline of Minneapolis glitters in the afternoon sun, indifferent and clean. The lead detective closes his notebook. "Mrs. Voss," he says, "I think we have everything we need." She stands, shakes their hands and leaves. In the hallway she checks her phone. One new message. It reads, "Thank you." She deletes it without replying. "My name is Harriet Sinclair. I'm not part of this story. I'm only the one telling it." On the morning of September 14, 2023, Dr. Elliot Voss, a respected cardiologist, philanthropist, and father of two, was found dead in his home office in the Kenwood neighborhood of Minneapolis. He was 47 years old. The cause of death was determined to be suicide by gunshot. A single wound to the temple. The weapon, a Glock 19 registered in his name, was found in his right hand. There was no sign of forced entry. No struggle. No note. But there didn't need to be, because everyone who knew Elliot Voss understood exactly why he did it. 3 weeks earlier, the Minnesota Medical Board had opened an investigation into his practice. A former patient had come forward with allegations of overprescribing controlled substances, specifically Adderall and Xanax, to patients who didn't need them. The accusation was serious. If proven, it would mean the end of his career. Elliot had built his reputation on precision. He was the kind of doctor people waited months to see. He'd published papers. He sat on the board of 2 hospitals. His wife, Corinne Voss, was a prominent attorney. Their children attended private school. They lived in a house with a view of the lake. But none of that would survive a scandal. So when the investigation began, Elliot became withdrawn. He stopped sleeping. He missed dinners. Corinne told friends he was spiraling. On the night of September 13th, Corinne said she went to bed alone. Elliot stayed in his office as he had been doing for weeks. She woke at 6:15 a.m. to silence. When she went downstairs, she found him. She called 911 at 6:22 a.m. The police arrived within minutes. The scene was consistent with suicide. No inconsistencies. No red flags. The medical examiner's report confirmed it. Time of death, between 2 o'clock and 4 a.m. Elliot's colleagues weren't surprised. One of them, Dr. Gavin Tremaine, told investigators that Elliot had confided in him 2 days before his death. He'd said he couldn't live with the shame, that he'd rather be dead than disgraced. The funeral was held on September 20th. Over 300 people attended. Corinne gave a eulogy. She spoke about the pressure her husband had been under. She didn't defend him. He didn't need to. Everyone already understood. The case was closed within a week. Everything made sense. But not everyone was satisfied. Detective Amara Okonkwo had been the second officer on the scene that morning. She was young, 31, and new to homicide. She wasn't the lead. He was there to observe, to learn. And what she observed didn't sit right. It wasn't anything obvious. The scene was textbook. But there were small things. Details that felt curated. The gun, for instance. It was in Elliot's right hand. But when Amara looked at the photographs on his desk, she noticed something. In every photo where Elliot was writing, signing, holding a pen, he used his left hand. She mentioned it to her supervisor, Lieutenant Farrow. He shrugged. Ambidextrous, maybe. Or he picked up the gun with his dominant hand reflexively. It happens. He let it go. But then there was the timeline. Corinne had said she went to bed at 11 p.m. She didn't hear the gunshot. The house was large and she'd taken a sleeping pill. Fair enough. But when Amara reviewed the home security footage, standard in a neighborhood like Kenwood, she noticed something odd. The system had been disarmed at 1:47 a.m. Rearmed at 2:14 a.m. 27 minutes. When asked, Corinne explained that Elliot sometimes stepped outside to smoke when he was stressed. He would disarm the system, go out to the back patio, then rearm it when he came back in. Did he smoke? Amara asked. Not regularly, Corinne said. But lately, yes. Amara checked. No cigarettes were found in the office. No ashtray on the patio. No butts in the trash. She didn't push it. And then there was Dr. Gavin Tremaine. He was Elliot's closest colleague. A pulmonologist. 43, married, well-liked. He'd been the one to tell police that Elliot had confided in him about feeling suicidal. But when Amara cross-referenced phone records, she found something strange. Elliot and Gavin had exchanged several calls in the weeks leading up to the death. But the last call between them had been on September 10th, 3 days before Elliot died. Not 2 days as Gavin had claimed. It was a small discrepancy. Memory is unreliable. Grief distorts things. So, Amara requested Elliot's medical records. She wanted to see if there was any history of depression, prior prescriptions, anything that might confirm the narrative. The request was denied. Privacy laws, Farrow told her. The case is closed. Let it go. She did. For a while. 2 months later, the medical board concluded its investigation. They found no evidence of wrongdoing. The patient who had made the accusation, a woman named Lydia Hoff, recanted her statement. She admitted she'd been confused. She said she'd mixed up her doctors. It wasn't Elliot who had prescribed the medications. It was someone else. The board issued a formal statement clearing Elliot's name. Corinne Voss held a small press conference. She thanked the investigators. She said her husband's death had been a tragedy compounded by a false accusation. She hoped his name would now be remembered with the dignity it deserved. The media moved on. Amara Okonkwo read the statement in her office. She felt something unclench in her chest. Relief maybe. Or exhaustion. The case had been gnawing at her. But now with the investigation cleared, it made sense again. Elliot had been innocent. The accusation had been false. But the damage had already been done. He'd spiraled anyway. Killed himself over a lie. Tragic, yes. But understandable. She closed the file. That should have been the end of it. But 3 weeks later, Amara received an email. The subject line was blank. The sender was an anonymous account. The body of the email contained a single sentence. Lydia Hoff didn't recant because she was confused. Attached was a PDF. Amara opened it. It was a bank statement. Lydia Hoff's account. Dated September 18th. 5 days after Elliot's death. A deposit. $75,000. The memo line was blank. The source was listed as a wire transfer from a law firm, Bristow & Collier LLP. Amara looked them up. Bristow & Collier was a mid-sized firm in downtown Minneapolis. Corporate law. Estate planning. Contract disputes. One of their senior partners was Corinne Voss. Amara sat back in her chair. She opened Elliot's file again. Read through everything. The timeline. The security footage. The phone records. And then she did something she wasn't supposed to do. She went to see Gavin Tremaine. She found him at the hospital just finishing rounds. He agreed to talk to her in a quiet hallway near the ICU. I don't understand, he said. The case is closed. I know, Amara said. I just need to clarify something. He said Elliot told you he was suicidal. When was that exactly? Gavin hesitated. 2 days before he died. I already told you this. Your phone records show the last call between you was September 10th. That's 3 days before. Then I misremembered. Did you see him in person? No. So he told you over the phone? Gavin's jaw tightened. Yes. And you didn't think to report it? To tell anyone? I thought he was venting. I didn't think. He stopped. Looked away. I didn't think he'd actually do it. Mar watched him. Did Corinne ask you to say that? She asked quietly. Gavin stared at her. What? Did she ask you to tell us that Elliot confided in you? I'm not answering that. Why not? He leaned in. His voice dropped. Because you're fishing. And because I don't owe you anything. He walked away. Amar didn't follow. He went back to the security footage. Watched it again. The disarming at 1:47 a.m. The rearming at 2:14 a.m. She pulled the footage from the exterior cameras. Nothing. No one went outside. The system had been disarmed and rearmed from inside the house. Amar checked the access logs. Every disarm and rearm required a code. The code used at 1:47 a.m. was Elliot's. The code used at 2:14 a.m. was Corinne's. Amara requested Elliot's toxicology report. It had been standard, No drugs, no alcohol. But she noticed something she'd missed before. There was a faint notation. A secondary test had been run for benzodiazepines. Negative. Why would they test for that? She called the medical examiner's office. We ran it because Mrs. Voss mentioned he'd been taking Xanax, the examiner said. For anxiety. She thought it might be relevant. But it wasn't in his system? No. Either he hadn't taken it that day or he'd stopped taking it altogether. Amara hung up. She pulled Elliot's prescription records, publicly available through a physician database. He'd never been prescribed Xanax. Not by anyone. He went to see Corinne Voss. Corinne lived in the same house. She answered the door in a cashmere sweater and jeans. She looked tired but composed. Detective Okonkwo, she said. This is a surprise. I'm sorry to bother you, Amara said. I just have one question. Corinne folded her arms. Go ahead. You told the medical examiner that Elliot had been taking Xanax. But there's no record of him ever being prescribed it. Corinne blinked. I must have been mistaken. It was a chaotic time. You're an attorney, Amara said. You don't make mistakes like that. Corinne's expression didn't change. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that you wanted the medical examiner to look for benzodiazepines in his system. Because if they found them, it would support the narrative that he was anxious. Unstable. That's absurd. But they didn't find any. So either you were wrong or what? Mar took a breath. Or you gave him something else. Something that metabolizes faster. Something that wouldn't show up in a standard talk screen. Corinne stared at her. Then she smiled. You should leave, she said. Amar went back to the file. Read everything again. And then she saw it. The gun. The Glock 19. It had been registered to Elliot. Purchased 6 years earlier. No issues. But when Amara checked the registration date, she noticed something. The gun had been purchased on March 3, 2017. 3 days after Elliot had been mugged. He'd filed a police report. Someone had held him up outside a parking garage downtown. Took his wallet, his watch. No weapon involved. He'd bought the gun for protection. But the report also noted that Elliot had been shaken. That he'd told the responding officer he didn't believe in guns, but felt he had no choice. Amara found the officer. Retired now. She called him. Yeah, I remember, he said. Nice guy. Didn't seem like the type to own a firearm. But I guess fear changes people. Did he seem comfortable with it? Not at all. He told me he hoped he'd never have to use it. Said he didn't even know how to load it properly. Amara thanked him and hung up. She went to the evidence locker. Retrieved the Glock. It had been fired once. The slide had been racked. One spent casing. He checked the magazine. Fully loaded. 15 rounds. But the gun had been found with the slide locked back, standard after the last round is fired. Except there were still rounds in the magazine. Which meant someone had manually racked the slide after firing. Someone who knew how. Amara requested a meeting with Lieutenant Farrow. He brought everything. He listened. Then he shook his head. You're building a conspiracy out of coincidences. Sir. Corinne Voss is a respected attorney. Her husband killed himself. She's grieving. You're harassing her. She paid off the accuser. You don't know that. A wire transfer doesn't prove anything. It could be a settlement. A gift. Anything. And the gun. Maybe he racked it by accident. Maybe he flinched. Maybe he didn't know what he was doing. Amara stared at him. You're not going to pursue this. Farrow leaned forward. No, I'm not. Neither are you. This case is closed. If you keep pushing, I'll have you reassigned. She left his office. 2 days later, Amara received another email. Same anonymous account. This time it was a video file. She opened it. Security footage. Not from the Voss house. From a hotel. The Marquette, downtown Minneapolis. Timestamp September 13th, 1:52 a.m. The lobby was empty except for one person. Corinne Voss. She walked in, went to the elevator and disappeared from frame. She reappeared at 2:11 a.m., walked out. Got into a car. Amara checked the hotel registry. Room 914 had been booked that night under the name G. Tremaine. She didn't go to Farrow. She went to the prosecutor's office. Requested a meeting with the DA. She laid out everything. The DA listened. Then he said, This is all circumstantial. You don't have a confession. You don't have a weapon that can't be explained. You don't even have a clear motive. She wanted him dead, Amara said. Why? I don't know yet. Then you don't have a case. Amara went back to the beginning. She pulled Elliot's financial records. Corinne's too. And there was. Elliot had a life insurance policy. $3 million. Beneficiary, Corinne Voss. But it had a suicide clause. If he died by suicide within 2 years of the policy's issue date, the payout was void. The policy had been issued on September 20, 2021. Elliot died on September 14, 2023. 6 days after the clause expired. Amara sat in her car outside the Voss house. She didn't have enough for an arrest. She knew that. But she knew the truth. Corinne had killed her husband. She'd staged it. Paid off the accuser. Coached Gavin. Disarmed the security system. Driven to the hotel to establish an alibi, then returned. She'd sedated Elliot. Something fast-acting, undetectable. Positioned the gun, fired it, and racked the slide to make it look like suicide. And she'd done it 6 days after the insurance clause expired. All of it had made sense. Until it didn't. My name is Harriet Sinclair. 3 months after Amara Okonkwo closed her personal investigation, Corinne Voss collected the $3 million payout from Elliot's life insurance policy. She donated $500,000 of it to the Minnesota Medical Board in her husband's name. Dr. Gavin Tremaine left Minneapolis in January 2024. He now practices in Arizona. Lydia Hoff moved to Oregon. She never spoke publicly about the case again. Detective Amara Okonkwo requested a transfer. She works in financial crimes now. No charges were ever filed. Corinne Voss still lives in the house in Kenwood. She remarried last spring. Her children are doing well. And every year on September 14th she visits Elliot's grave. She brings flowers. She stays for exactly 5 minutes. And then she leaves. Because grief, like everything else, has its place. And Corinne Voss has always been very good at knowing exactly where things belong.